Okay, so I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order of Thursday, March 27th. Thank you all for being here. Would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Arevalo. Here. Commissioner Ayala.
Present.
Commissioner Burleson. Here. Commissioner Garber. Commissioner Meeks.
Yes, here.
Commissioner Ward.
Here.
Commissioner Tomites.
Here. Okay, our next item is citizen comment. Do we have anyone signed up online or in person? That being no, we'll get to our item 4. First item on item 4, section 1 is approval of the minutes, and you'll see all of the minutes from the last 4 meetings, I think. So in the agenda packet, and they were kind of expanded a little bit just to add a little bit more depth and into our conversations. And they're pretty consistent with the process or the style of which the minutes were in the last Charter Review Commission in 2021. So does anybody, well, first off, can I have a motion to approve the minutes? And a second, please? Okay, Yancy seconded, and Amy, is there any discussion on what anybody read in the minutes? I know it's, they were they were a little delayed and just wanted to make sure that they were accurate.
One of the things we'll do at the end, of course, is bring you a comprehensive proposal to council. That'll, in a formal sense, that'll be one more chance to make sure you.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Arevalo. Commissioner Ayala. Commissioner Burleson.
Yes.
Commissioner Garber absent. Commissioner Meeks.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward.
Aye.
Commissioner Tomites.
Aye. Okay, thank you for that. And I think we discussing and considering our next meeting, we did that at our last meeting, and we were still on the Thursday track. And the next meeting was tentatively scheduled last week for the 3rd. Is that what we chose?
Thursday.
That's a week
third.
from today.
Yes.
So same time, same place. Sorry.
Yes, and yes, and also I wanted to let everyone know, since we're talking about scheduling, the city. There is an interim discussion on the city council agenda for April 1st.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the interim discussion is relatively new. It's only been done once before in the Charter Review Commission of 2021. Prior to that, it has never been done, but it was added in nonetheless. And so there is a short presentation given by the chair of the Charter Commission to the city council. And when I say short, I mean short, high level, essentially hitting some of the highlights of what we discussed, just a report to the council. We're not done, obviously. And so there's no, it's an awkward situation in a little bit because we're not done yet and we haven't taken the actions. We've been working this through consensus. And obviously, as we've talked about at the end of our process towards our last meeting, we will come back with all of those for formal votes, all the items that we had consensus on. It's just going to be a summary, I guess, of the items, that we have made it through. We're only on section 7 of 12 sections. We'll be farther than that after tonight, but obviously we'll touch on the suggestions that the city council sent to us and give a short, I'm assuming that's mostly what they're interested in. But it is tentatively, hopefully scheduled for the early part of the meeting.
Yes, the
As a
6 o'clock
presentation.
Meeting, it should be first thing.
Listed as a
presentation.
presentation. And so there will be a little back and forth, maybe. I mean, I'm assuming there'll be a couple of questions. But you're welcome to come. Any commissioners that come, I'll recognize you as a fellow commissioner and then just give this short
You
presentation.
don't need it. You're okay.
Yeah, no.
I mean, if it helps me show up, I'll show up. But if not,
I would say no, I'd say probably not. As I say, it's not been the precedent. It's changed.
that's how we have our fearless leader.
Yes. You can imagine that it's,
For another reason, so
Yeah.
that'd be the only reason I'd be there.
And what I will do is, like Chairman said, you don't have to be there, but I'll post a notice of potential quorum of,
okay.
in case y'all 4 of you show up.
Oh.
I know,
Post that in the bulletin board outside.
I know Jim Garber will be there.
Yes, it's fine, totally fine.
Yeah, it's just a short notice.
Will you go into, I guess the one thing that has really been nebulous for us with the council was that to do with the redistricting. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was, where we were kind of pushing back, and I was just wondering if that's a chance for them to give you inputs, or we just kind of still wait until the end.
I mean, here's the fine line in my view is we're an independent commission. We were chartered to give our recommendations and then it becomes theirs anyways in the end. And, they have all the time in the world to discuss this and we're on a deadline to finish our work. And so on behalf of the commission, I'm hoping it's all okay with you. I was, looking to if I could describe it as be open to suggestions, but not direction. Because we're doing our work, no one knows the charter better than we do right now. And we're going through it line by line. And I understand that other council members have served on the charter commission. And so they'll be prepared to do their role, but this is our role now. And so that's kind of my mindset of it, really. Like I say, this is, in the 4 or 5 charter review processes that I was involved in, we didn't have this. We let them do their work. We accepted their work. And then sometimes we accepted it. As you know, sometimes we didn't. So, and then we did our work yesterday. So we both have roles and so, yeah, I mean, and obviously you can watch it or we can talk about it at the next meeting. I don't expect anything spectacular to come out. I think it's pretty procedural. So I just wanted to let y'all know that. And then, so I'd like to pick up where we left off, which was in section 7, and it was on section 702, I think it was.
I was thinking we were starting at 7:04, but I could.
No, we had section 701 on page 20, actually. We had just a couple of large discussions that did not result in direction or consensus. So I'd like to start in section 701, which is page 20 of 36 in your packet. And the last lengthy conversation that we had was on item number C as in cat at the bottom, 7C. And I don't know why Jim is not here. I'm hoping he got caught by a train, but he and I had a conversation about it as well. And I know that we had a lengthy conversation on basically the entire comprehensive plan process of being every 5 years. And I think one of the areas that we may have left off on was that if you have this requirement that this is due every 5 years, and the process with the comprehensive plan takes 2 years sometimes or more, and then the natural conclusion to a comprehensive plan process is the rewrite of the land development code, right? To implement this vision of the citizens in actual code. And that process often takes a year or more, sometimes 2 years. So the last comp plan process prior to COVID took 6 years from start to finish. So to us, and Jim will reiterate this when he does arrive here, to us, the requirement that it happens every 5 years when it takes sometimes 6 years to complete makes no sense. It incurs a tremendous amount of staff time. It incurs a tremendous, I mean, essentially, you're always doing one. And a tremendous amount of cost and expense because these are almost always accompanied by the hiring of an outside firm to assist writing comprehensive plans and land, especially land development code updates. So I don't mind waiting for Jim if you all think that's more appropriate, but I do know that we both felt that the 5 year was totally too unrealistic. Thought it should be around 10 years. So I wanted to maybe kick that off if there's any conversation or questions. Yes, Yancy.
Last time about, what it says here, and we're on 702.7C, right?
Yes.
So we talk about the interpretation of the word update, right? It says update here, but some people have taken it to mean an entire rewrite of the comprehensive plan. Is what we kind of discussed last time.
Right, because it says entire right after that. Update of the entire comprehensive.
Okay, I
plan.
see. So, I would be okay with 10 years, but maybe just adding updates between.
Yeah. I mean, the council can change the comp plan anytime it chooses. And I think it is in there.
And the code and the land development code has a specific process. So in fact, we've had deals where
Yeah.
I think that the comp plan was just approved and within 6 months, less a year, amendments can be made for whatever reason. So there is a process for amending it.
Yes, that's what I meant to say.
Yes.
It was just the whole effort and then the I guess unintended consequences of citizens taking part in a lengthy 2 year process because there's a lot of citizen involvement. There's a lot of staff time. And then all of a sudden it changes. It's like you just finished it and then you're starting over again. And I think that decreases interest in participating in those efforts. I know it did for me. I'm sure it did for others. So there's that. I actually think you could go longer than 10 years, but I mean, that's just a kicking off point that we thought of. Anybody else? Any other comments on this?
I'm thinking we're gonna have to explain why. And I think your explanation is valid. It makes sense, especially people that have been involved in various levels of it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm okay with the 10 years that you're recommending. Council may feel like they may want to settle on 8 or something, or they may go with the 10. They may not want to double because we're basically double 5 to 10.
Yeah.
And you know, if they think through it, they may understand our reasoning. But anyway, so I'm okay with 10, and I do think it's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and I think we would provide, somewhat of an explanation on this one. And I mean, it's great that we have three planning and zoning commissioners here as well, because you guys have to deal with it as well. And it's lengthy. And I'll wait for Jim on this part, but we were talking at length about, you can almost, what we're trying to maybe prohibit as well is, say there's a regime change, the pendulum swings, for instance, and all of a sudden the new team comes in, it's got a new vision for council, and they want to redo the whole thing. This says, go for it. And what we were talking about was, is that really what's best for the community? I don't think so. Community decides on a vision. They write plans to accomplish that vision. And all of a sudden, a few council members with different priorities switch, and now it has to be redone. That's terrible. That's national politics right here in San Marcos. And so it was part of our interest, I think, to write it in such a way that you had to give it time, like you had to give it that.
Like that.
Like the time period or elected.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that there's other parts in this where it's very specific about dates, for instance, and it says, like, you'll get to section 12 and it's going to say, council visioning session has to take place no later than January 31st of every year, and council budget policy statements have to come out by February 30th of every year, calendar year. I wanted to bounce it off you guys first to get a time frame, a number of years, what you think is good, or if you feel 10 is good, and then try to word the revision, the recommended amendment to the charter in such a way that it only happens every 10 years.
Because right now, even if you change it to at least once every 10 years.
Yep.
You can do, that's the least you can do 20, you can do 30.
Right.
It doesn't matter, so. Changing the year.
Right, there's some language that would need there.
And again, of course, individual amendments can happen during
Wow,
5 years, like one section or this, just under the normal code.
And
process.
that's a good,
different-
yeah, that's a good deal, because if you see something that's just not working in the LDC, which happens, and that happened the last time we passed it.
When was the 5-year put in place? Or when was that last change? There's a whole bunch down there.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'd have to look at the individual ordinances
I'm just-
that are listed, and I could find that.
I guess, I'm rolling this around in my head right now, and if we're looking at the growth that we've got right now in the city, does 10 year, if it's 5 years, are we able to be a little bit more adept in any changes going on in the landscape out there for, business, for the housing, for changes versus 10 years that we're kind of locking things in that we're maybe not as adept at changing? I mean, I see the point. That's why I'm listening, because I've.
Yeah. And I think that,
The point that you brought up exactly was that they were very angry that it was at 5 years, and then you're starting it all back over and making changes. What the heck?
and you can still be nimble. That's standard process. It's not hard. It starts at council. They hold a public hearing, goes back to P and Z. They hold a public hearing, goes back to council. There's another public hearing or something along that line, and you have a change. You have a LDC change. So I think that the fail-safe for that exact scenario is built in.
That's good.
But I do think that I do think that the stability situation outweighs, and you asked, when did this come into place? My guess is it was an overreaction to a comprehensive plan and a land development code that had not been updated for 30 years. And I remember when that happened. And that was in the early 2000s. And so it just fell by the wayside. It never happened. And everyone was complaining because it was 30 years old. And so I think what happened was, we need to do it every 5 years.
I guess that's why I was asking, John, it's
Yeah.
just the context for this. If it is, if it was just a few cycles ago and we're now kind of trying to get this leveled out, or if this is something that's just been in there, right? But that was my suspicion that it had to do with that 30.
I found it looks like it was the 2013, I'm sorry, the, yes, 2013,
Okay.
was
that?
5 year. For when it changed, it used to be 10 years and it looks like it changed in 2013 to at least every 5 years.
But I do remember when there was no 10-year thing. I mean, there was no requirement because we had in 2005, I think we had Mayor Narvaez was there and we had the whole process, it took years. They wrote the whole thing and it took forever. And we finally passed it. But there was just so much consternation that it had been there so long.
Well, I think that the 5 years just as people wanted to stay on top of their city. They wanted to make sure it was all of this. So no harm, no foul.
Right.
Maybe it's, like you said, it's requiring too much.
So to clarify, Sam, it was 2013 was when they went from 10 years down to 5 years. Correct?
That's what it looks like. The way the proposition reads, an amendment to require the commission to recommend updates to the entire document every 5 years instead of every 10 years.
So we'll be changing something that's in place for the last 12 years to what it was before, basically, is it?
Yeah, because we're doing 2 comp plans and 2 LDC rewrites in the last 10 years. We're doing 2 of them.
Okay. It gives a little bit more of a creates why we want to do it. That's all. Yeah, it's just okay. It didn't quite work. We need to tweak it.
And for those who, I know most of us have been through that process, but for those in this commission that haven't, just a rough timeline, ballpark numbers I'll give you. The last one started 2002 and did not get completed until 2018.
Just kept getting through.
Well, no, I mean, it started and they spent 2 years in the comprehensive plan process. There was there's always a steering committee of 40 people and that kind of thing. And then that stuff finally got written in a draft form and accepted. It has to go to P&Z, it has to go to council, there's amendment processes and stuff. That finally got accepted. And then finally in 2018, after 2 years of rewriting the land development code and same thing, had to go to council. And that was all pre-COVID. So yeah, anyway.
I think it needs to be too, simply because we told you this last time, we'd be in meetings and the downtown didn't match and all these things because it's too much going on all at once. And they don't have time to match it up to be able to, you have people coming to you and you're having to use an old code that, it just, does that make sense? It just didn't jive. It didn't.
It made running the city more different. It's like people were speaking different languages in different departments. You're talking to planning, you're talking to code.
And
Starting 2003 is when I guess the plan was made, and then in 2018 is when it was finalized.
No, it started in 2000. Did I say 2003? 2000. 12, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Not as bad.
Yeah.
6 years.
I thought it was even longer than that.
To 2012, everybody was seated and everything like that. And then they actually did a lot of work, a lot of meetings in 2013 and 2014. Report comes out. Then it has to go to another step, you know, and then there's another committee for that. And that committee is made up of people who use the code and other, you know, more technical people like Lisa Arsenault is typically on that for watershed protection. And, you know, she's a hydrologist and a citizen and staff and consultants and everything. And I know I can tell you for a fact that the transportation portion of the master plan was that thick, and I would bet my house it cost more than $500,000 to produce. So these are big numbers, you know, every 5 years. Yeah.
Was one of them, like, I guess after they got past 2012, a new one was started shortly after that, is what you're saying?
No, it's always when it says comp plan, it's two steps. It's the comprehensive plan, which we call River Run Through Us, or
Yep.
San Marcos River runs through us. And then the second part, which is writing the technical ordinance, the laws that accomplish that comp plan, you know, and for the development of the city, the LD's Land Development Code.
So, sorry, did you?
I just wanted to ask, so were there milestones that need to be met within the comprehensive plan to reach, I guess, it doing what it was meant to do? And if there should be milestones, right? There were milestones that are made for the plan.
Yeah, I mean, typically because staff has all their other work to do, their day to day, and to work with the citizenry and the current developments that are occurring, city has to hire a outside consulting firm, typically a planning firm or an engineering firm that has a planning division. I don't know if anybody knows this, but engineering firms and planning firms are no bid. They're not bid contracts. It's against the law to require bids from engineering firms in the state of Texas. So they are just given. They're accepted. They give you a number. You vote yes or no. So
Just because.
it's the greatest lobbying effort.
The Texas Government Code has a provision for professional services. You can only hire the most qualified firms, and then you can negotiate a price, but that's a whole.
So it's not the lowest bidder because you might get a bad. rate.
Different than like
Technically.
construction contract.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's different.
Okay.
Lobbying at the state level, Ms. Jones.
It's
Do they market themselves? Like, do you just ask one person and accept their bid, or does the city?
no, there's typically a group of choices, and staff works with choosing who to work with. And they pick one.
Right, there's still a process. There's a process, but yes, it's a little different than your traditional bidding, but yes, you have to still follow the government
Can be
code.
very fuzzy.
And I heard they get recommendations too, and like they'll
It's
ask different
compliant, but
people.
That's.
Yeah, I mean, it's all on the up and up. It's just the up and up is kind of
Yeah.
weird in the state of Texas. And I get it in some cases, but in others, I'm like, I know it pushes up prices. It's incredibly expensive. What were you going to ask, Nancy?
So was the one in 2012, the comprehensive plan that was being revised, was that the one that was already 30 years old, or was that a different?
No, the Narvaez one was in the early 2000s. That was the one that was very old. And 2012 was, I guess Daniel Guerrero was mayor at that
was
time.
it Horizons, the one that,
Yeah, that Horizons was the old one.
I apologize, you were here longer.
When was the original 10-year? Implemented?
He said 2013.
Well, no, that's when 2013 is when we changed it to the 5.
Yeah.
Oh, to 5.
Yeah.
So
So maybe
before that,
10
there
was
never
probably.
been anything.
So.
It's probably
I don't-
because they were so late and they were trying to just get it to come soon.
Do you have a change history for any further back? in?
I'd have to open up each one of these ordinances to see.
Okay,
We'll say through like a Google search, a lot of cities do 5 years, right? Like Seoul has 5 years, Versa has 5 years, Plano has 5 years. Like it seems to be the standard, but it depends on whether the charter has realized whether there's redundancy or some shit and stuff. So I think with what you're saying, I think if we change the word updated there for sure and remove that from that last sentence and change that to a full rewrite or a substantial rewrite, because it's confusing to have update at the top of once.
And then it says entire.
Yeah, and then that's its entire, because anyone can take update as like, it is an entire
It's tough
update.
to do it entire thing.
So
So do we feel we have consensus for an entire rewrite at a 10-year?
That's what I was just gonna say.
Interval.
This update and rewrite are two things. If they say we have to do a rewrite, what if we're okay with most of the things? Then it's an update. So how do we give them leeway? How do we give the next?
Well, one of the things is it's making recommendations regarding an update of it. One of the recommendations in theory, but I know it doesn't work this way. The recommendation could be, we're happy with it as that's our recommendation on the rewrite. But from your
Yeah.
experience, it seems that it opens the door for a total,
Yeah, it seems to be just
but in theory,
process of 5 years.
you could say, we don't want any changes in theory. The way it's worded.
so what is the recommendation? So we've got two recommendations we're looking at. If I can summarize this, you've got Dan, what would be your suggestion for the replacement of the update again?
that was to remove the word,
The word for update.
update of the entire comprehensive plan to just say a potential rewrite.
Substantial rewrite. Okay. That's at least, John, I think what's suggested right now, right? Or are we still kind of discussing
Of
this?
course, that's a tricky term.
Yeah.
In terms of legals are like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I think the goal is they want a review of it. Of the whole thing every so many years. They're not saying it all has to be changed, but they want that ongoing review. I think that's the real objective here is.
So like.
It's a comprehensive review of the whole thing is what I think they're really.
So
It's ongoing review. Number 7, that's what it says.
And the problem with that, with having it at say 5 years is the mental thought is we're gonna redo it because you review it anytime. You can review it. We reviewed it a year after we wrote it.
But so that portion of it, I think I'm hearing, 10 years. There's been precedents on this. We're kind of curious about how far back it went that it was 10 years. But I think I'm hearing from everybody 10, but it's that update was what I was wondering. Is that the other suggestion change, the wording change on that? And is it review? I don't know. That's.
I think if you leave the 5 in there, then it's always going to be 5. I think if you say if you use the language, and that's why I would like to take some time to write the language and come back with it, and I can work with Jim on that. But if the core is that we feel it should be an entire comprehensive plan review with updates at 10 years, I think we should word it that way. If we think that it should be an entire comprehensive plan review with updates at 5 years and then a complete rewrite at 10 years, then maybe we should word it that way. But I do think if you put the 5 years in there, it's really hard to balance all the competing proposed changes. And you're going to end up rewriting the thing every 5 years as we're doing now. And that's what I'm suggesting we try to avoid. But, you know, it's just a suggestion.
Well, but isn't it true, somebody over here said, you do shoot, that if we say 10 years, they can do it before that if they want to.
If we leave it at least.
Right.
That's right now, at least every 10 years. So they're saying, and I think the intention is, we don't want it to grow stale either. We want the comp plan to evolve with the city. But does that mean every year versus it's a 10-year interval, at least every 10 years? Like, yes, it doesn't prevent more frequent, but they don't want to sit around for 30 years without review. That's really the idea.
If you have a good comprehensive plan, it should be able to.
It should last 10 years. Yeah.
If it doesn't, if you have not a good situation going on and you got, you know, then you can do it earlier. So I just want to leave in that leeway.
I wanna leave it to, where it says the 5, but figure out the wording like you're saying. Maybe if you put a minor of the, you know what I mean?
But I think that gets tricky because
Yeah.
you can argue all day long. One paragraph, if the document could be so significant, that in itself is a major substantial, you know, I
Is
think
there a
it's.
template for the comprehensive plan that has to be followed when the new one is written every year or every time it's rewritten? And what I mean by that, are there specific sections of the comprehensive plan which can show like if 2/3 of the comprehension plan are being substantial? Half of the,
Yeah,
because I know there's a transportation, right? We have a land use and transportation element, but that one we will okay with every 3 years, because we understand, you know, how transportation changes in our city. So is there a threshold that can be measured? Yes, or and what the components are of a comprehensive plan? Because I haven't seen the comprehensive, so.
Well, here's a template. I'm going to try to answer that question. Section B 703 says the commission shall conduct an ongoing review of the plan in accordance with section 702. So it's directing the planning commission to ongoing review the plan. And I'm assuming it's for just what you said, that if there are changes in the times and all of a sudden no one drives a car anymore, that's all autonomous, that we can go back and make the necessary changes to accommodate that change in our society.
So do we have that?
We absolutely have that ability. The council may amend the comprehensive plan after at least one public hearing on the proposed action. It's that simple.
Amy, what needed to be changed when the downtown and the comp didn't match? Was it something in the comp that had to be rewritten? Because the downtown came after the comp, so I don't remember.
right. The comp plan usually defines everything else that's a sub part of it. Downtown, the different, I can't think of the new area off McCarty has a name.
Yes.
I can't think of it, but the different zones we have in the city. So again, I think the way the charter is, it's kind of a high level document too. I think it's just trying to ensure that there are enough safeguards that these things don't get stale. I don't think it's preventing more frequent amendments and reviews and whatnot to secure, necessary changes. It's just that, it's trying not to compel you to do it every single year either. It's at least, what's a reasonable period of time, I think is what it's striving for. Just,
Well, since we're
doesn't
getting,
prevent you from more frequent minor amendments here and there.
since we're getting held up on the language, we'll put together some language and bring it back.
Let's come up with some proposals.
Okay.
There's one-
Anything
one
else on
final-
this?
Just one final
Yeah.
statement. I always look at this process coming into here is that if it has already been changed and it has gone through the election process, we've gone through this, that I'm real hesitant to go back, flip it back to 10 years without good reason. Now, I'm hearing justification that, hey, we've tried this. And yes, there's added cost, there's, these kind of things, it just didn't work. Okay, then again, that's that education that we're gonna have to do going back to the people to get this passed again, or not have to do this. I mean, our process, we're just recommending this to council, but if it does need to go through, there's gonna have to be, why are we doing this again? Just voted on this in 2013.
Yeah, but this is and so the point I think is that's our role here is to figure out what's not working in our charter. And I'll give you an example. In 2018, in May, we finalized the comp plan, the land development code. We finally passed it. And then in 2019, the process was started to rewrite it. And that's not a lot. 2019 or maybe the late 2019, early 2020, the process was started again.
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing. All I'm getting at is, I'm just laying this out.
Yeah.
Again, this is something that if I have to explain to somebody down the line, that's all. I'm just trying to.
See, we were told in P and Z that a lot of things were older. So then they updated them and started trying to rectify the problems that were in them. But then you had all these other things come about, and that's why they were having to update all these things. But then you update something over here, then you realize, oh, wow, that didn't really match the comp plan. So now they had to go back and correct the comp plan. But I don't want to take it away because I don't want to take away their ability or put too much wording that takes away their ability to correct the issues that we had. Because we're standing in a meeting and someone is saying, what do you expect us to do? Because your comp plan doesn't match your downtown plan. And then I think we had to postpone
I
something.
can't remember, I wish Jim were here.
Yeah, but it was like a little confusing, and it was confusing for us because and then staff had a no recommendation because it didn't match. And because I thought, whoa, what's going on here? So I don't want to take away their ability to correct the things that are not working. And I think maybe that's why it was 5 years because, or at least, I don't know.
But it's in 703 that they can make those changes.
So we're.
It doesn't
that's-
prevent.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is really setting them,
For the
at
entire-
least, it's at least every, so, but yes, individual amendments or inconsistencies or irregularities that are found in that interim period can be made on those individual
I don't have
basis.
a problem with the 10 years thing.
And I think if you put the word at least, it's gonna happen every 10 years. If you say at least 10 years, it's gonna, because right now it says at least every 5, and it happens every 5.
Was it at least once?
Mhm.
So we could
Can you imagine?
Well, at least once every 5 means no,
What?
it means you're gonna do it every 5 years.
Right,
But you could also do it every 3 years and then again, right?
yeah.
Well, you could, sure, but you're gonna at least do it once every 5 years. So if you say at least once every 10 years,
Love it.
Because you've not even had a chance to find out if the plan is even working, right?
I do feel like it's such a monumental undertaking for everyone in this city, for citizens, for the staff, for the budget, everybody. It's just such a huge process. So foolish to do that every 5 years, my opinion.
Is our comprehensive plan meant to be a 20-year vision?
Yes.
Well, when you're talking about, well, let's talk about a couple of things that are in a comp plan is, block sizes, how many compatibility of types of development, Does that change over decades? Yes. But does it change over 5 years? No. And so if you're trying to build like this guy came to P and Z, he's trying to do something and maybe the code doesn't match in your case, the code didn't match, but a lot of these projects take 5 years to buy property, conceive of the idea, get the financing, get the approvals, and then all of a sudden it's going to change again. It's not like your grandfather once that new code is written.
But I thought that some of them, they had their paperwork in, because that was another thing that came up in this discussion, was they had their paperwork turned in, so therefore we could base one part off of the old code and then use the other part off of the new code, and it was just, excuse the
And
expression.
what you're talking about there is in the land development world, Texas has a law about vesting. So, well, I think that's what you may be talking about. So when, right now, by the way, the legislature is not been real friendly to cities in the development realm, and you're seeing some of that, and it's gonna continue to evolve. But so one of the things is somebody submits an application on this date before you adopt your new code and your new rules. They're allowed to continue under the old rules. So they're vested in the old rules. So one of the things that happens going to the chair's point about the amount of resources and effort goes into it as well. Every time we make those changes, we have to archive the old ordinances so that we know, oh, you filed your application. We have some people come back and they'll say, they filed their plat application 20 years ago. And in
This was an
Texas
old
law,
one, but this was
they
an
may
old
be
one.
vested in many instances. So if we have to go back all the way back to each set of codes to find out which one applies to that
Does
development.
And that's
it
exactly
ever,
what I'm talking
can
about.
you ever say after 10 years, you gotta do the new one?
Not in Texas, no.
Wow.
Because
The state legislature says.
Well, in the courts, the cases have been pretty clear on that. It's pretty tough.
And that's what I'm talking about. It just got real difficult. So when you're changing these plans all the time and people are bringing you something, and then we're thinking, we're basing it off of this new code that we've been given and said, this is what you use. And then you're looking at the packet and staff is saying, okay, but hold up, because this doesn't apply, because the comp plan, the downtown plan came after the comp plan and they don't match, and we're sitting here going, okay.
And I don't want to overstate that there are times when vesting can terminate, but it's very tricky. So if you start out with, I'm going to build a hotel 20 years ago, but then you decide it stays vacant, it's going to become residential development, you're vested to the hotel, not the development. So projects, most people are not vested to 100 years back, I'm just saying, but it's tricky. And so just
Okay.
that concept.
We've spent enough time.
Yeah. I was gonna
Okay.
say,
Well,
we
I'm
can-
good as long as they have the ability to make those changes as needed.
Yeah.
10 years is good because you don't run into these problems that we're running into now.
So you're gonna work on language?
Yeah. And we'll,
So you're gonna go off the gym.
yeah, we just had a short conversation about it today when we were
Okay.
talking about that other thing. And then we'll just bring it back for our next meeting for more specific language. 703, this is just what we've been talking about, the comprehensive plan. So I'm not sure we need to go through this whole thing again unless there any specific changes, but this kind of goes into exactly what we were talking about with the way that you can amend the comprehensive plan over time. So let's go to section 8, Sam, please.
This is getting into our budget process, and we have a very transparent process in St. Marcus for budget, and also it's a planning deal. It starts at the high level, and then as you get further along in the budget process, it starts to distill down to the very specific details of the budget. So the fiscal years, in 801 fiscal years, October through September every year. Some places might have a calendar year for their fiscal year, for example. January 31st of each year, that's when council holds a visioning session. We just had that. And by February 27th, council will hold a budget policy workshop. Again, high level stuff. What are our aspirations? We want to improve public safety. We want to improve parks. And then that helps city manager prioritize where the limited funds can go. Then a policy statement used by city manager for direction preparing the proposed budget. That's occurred. And then, subsection C, city manager not less than 30 days prior to the time city council makes its tax levy for the fiscal year shall file with the city clerk a proposed budget. And again, this is something the public can see. They can look at the draft budget, make comments on. One of the reasons for some of these deadlines is state law sets very strict parameters for cities. And we have to compress a lot of different actions within those timeframes, or our budget could not be adopted if we don't follow the state timelines. I don't know if there's any specific things.
Let me just throw out there, as Sam said, most of the budget process, everybody who's watched it, it's the same every single year. It has to balance. You can't spend more than you take in, and you have to have that budget finalized and approved by the final meeting in August, because September 1 is your fiscal year. I will say in 802A, the commission made a recommendation to change that last time. It didn't pass, so it stayed the way it is written now.
And I'm gonna throw a radical one in here.
Go for it.
Has there ever been any change to us changing the calendar from the October physical to the calendar?
That I- Go for it.
Okay, is that what's happening now is you're up against the tax roll information that gets released in
March,
March.
April.
Yeah, and so what that means is that you're really compressed for public and for the hearings, and everything is all during the summertime when nobody's around. Number one. And number two, it's just a very compressed timeline that if to change it. And I just, the reason this comes up is that I did an interview this week with or last week with our manager, for our budget manager. And I asked that question, and she said, well, in where she comes from in Seattle, they did it on a calendar. And so that's where my thinking is here. I know that is just, that would be so radical of change, but I'm just kind of curious while we're talking about this.
I think that it may be state law. Checking.
That was one of the reasons why while he's looking at this, the budget policy and visioning documents were added to the charter in such stringent ways, was because we don't get the tax roll information from the county tax collector until March or April, sometimes a little later than that.
Yeah.
And so we really don't know what we have to spend from ad valorem, at least, until after the council's sat and done a vision and a budget policy. And we used to do it in May because we always went into budget policy discussions and vision sessions when we knew what we could spend.
Under state law, the budget has to be adopted, in September.
Okay.
So, but
It's still state law.
September, not August, I think it's August.
has to be adopted by then, but I guess, could you have a fiscal year that, okay, it's adopted then, but it doesn't kick in until January 1st? I guess you could do that. And I think our fiscal year kind of lines up more neatly with the state deadlines.
How quickly does the public have access to the budget?
Immediately.
Like, is it on the website?
Sure, and
It's in the agenda packet every year, the same meeting.
But here's where I've bristled in a few past years, is that it's when you only have a short time to go through as public to review because of that timeline. Once that is there, you only have a couple weeks basically before the first hearing. and you got the second hearing on the budget. So it really to go through and look at the entire budget that's out there and to go through. Now, you're right, you've got the planning session going, you've got all these sessions going up before that, John. But that's you only have a short amount of time to really look at that budget and dig into it as public before you actually have these hearings. So then you've got the first hearing, you've got the second hearing. Well, if public is not happy at that first hearing, then you've got council swinging around on that second hearing. And that was a point of contention with our city manager coming into this on the last budget process area. So I'm looking at any ways that you can make that better for people that we have a little bit more time to see that, but you're up against that tax rolls coming in from the appraisal district. And that's.
The state law gives us very little, that's one of the problems we have. State law is going to limit our ability to really expand those windows. So, of course, what the city does all year long is they're giving estimates, projections. We just had a workshop and they were listing out, this is our proposed budget. They were laying out by line item.
Yeah.
But again, it's not the final, it's our proposed, it's where we're headed. And yes, council kind of steers it along, but
And I would
State
push
law.
back, I would push back just gently and say there are probably 6 or 8 agenda items on the budget prior to the first reading. And what I want to say mostly is you're the only one who ever came to them.
Okay.
And I mean that. You remember sitting in there. You were the only one sitting in the audience when we were discussing the city budget through those multiple. There's budget workshops. There's budget discussions. There's direction given as the council's winnowing everything down to those final 2 meetings. Yancy.
So who sets the dates and times for the workshop budgets?
The council agendas are set by the mayor.
of course, some of it is right here in the charter, right? For some of the early stages of the,
Yeah.
then another part of it is the state law. Where the time
By
frame
certain
between the
days.
tax roll and the adoption of the budget. So that's,
The professional staff works with the
And
elected.
You're asking days and time, what people want to work and then, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because the last workshops that they had were,
The
2
3
days
o'clock.
and it was 8 hours long. Most people are at work those days. So it's not,
I get it.
They're doing this time around, and that was part of the interview. They're doing a visioning process this year a little differently. They've got 2 online surveys and they've closed one of them and now they're starting up the visioning process okay, so I use the analogy that if you have a budget, okay, what your paycheck's going to be. Well, guess what? If your paycheck isn't, you're cutting hours, you're down to 30 hours, 35 hours. You've got to cut somewhere. What's your priority? What comes in first? Where are those? And that's what the city is kind of looking for from the public. So, which is, I think, an improvement from past years with what they're doing. So just my 2 cents on the process right now that I know. And that was one of my thoughts was before, you're right, that in order for people to be at a lot of these meetings and to get that input, it was difficult. Now they've got that online. It makes it a little bit easier that people can be part of the process.
I still push back gently because most of those budget policy discussions and there's public input, there's always citizen comment at the meeting. Those are in the regular meeting after 6 p.m. And nobody ever came to them. And I mean that. And I'm not being facetious when I say I'm not nobody, but so few people would come to that. But if you had a animal ordinance or a data center or something like that, boy, oh boy, right? But when you're talking about the nuts and bolts budget, they're talking about how much goes to, what is the increase in insurance this year for the city organization? What is the increase in, fuel to run the fleets, that kind of stuff, buying fire trucks, buying bucket trucks. Nobody cares. They just don't. I'm sorry, but very few people came in and it was frustrating.
They always had like a, how they have it at the activity center and people can come in and view it and look. I always thought they had that for the budget too.
We did, like, for example, we had that January, beginning of January, this year. We had an all-day, in fact, might have been, I don't remember if it was 2 sessions or not, but, and, it was at the activity center, public was allowed to speak. And that's where the city manager saying, council, what are your priorities going to be? What is our vision? Concepts that we only have X amount of money, our taxes are flat. What are we going to do with that money? How much do you want new police cars? You prefer to improve parks or whatever the different things are, cars, parks, streets. And that's where council starts to, which is no easy task, right? That helps the city manager kind of prioritize. And they go back and they say, well, that's what we got. Here are the different needs. They go back to council and they start to, as you know, you've been through it many times, start to narrow it down. Here's where we're going to spend our money. For example, this year, HSA, they're recommending an increase, right? Because that was a new priority for the council versus in past years. HSA, Human Services Advisory Board. Yeah, so.
Well, they brought CIP to us, the capital improvements, and it's always they're proposed, and they'll tell you if there's not enough money, then the less important projects get moved to the next year. And that's something, if y'all look at P and Z, because we just had an information only thing on that, and it was in the packet, and it shows you like they're proposed and it shows the years. And that would be something good, because I remember the very first time I saw that, it helped me explain why projects didn't get done as quickly as we thought. It could take 8 to 10 years from the time they're even brought up to us. But that might be something really good for you to look at, because it kind of helps you understand the process and what they're doing.
Not to mention,
CIP.
it also told us about funding will come from.
and not to belabor the point, but 75% or more of the city's general fund budget is staff, is the people that run the city. So you're really talking about a 25 or less % of all the revenues in the general fund. That's what you're spending 6 months discussing, basically. And as most people say,
To the staff.
you spend 90% of your time talking about 10% of your money. Because it is, there's just so many constraints. There's so many more needs than money. Well, I'm going to skip through section 8 because, data final adoption, public hearings, these are all required by law. Unless there's anything specific.
I do have something that.
Yes.
I was asked a couple of constituents they wanted 3 things relating to the budget.
Okay.
They wanted the open access, I see that is on right here, it's public record. But they wanted that to include plain language explanation of key expenditures. For citizens to be able to fully understand what it is that they're looking at. And what that. And then the other thing was any budget amendments or emergency allocations exceeding whatever amount we decide must be posted within a certain time, within a certain amount of time since it. So if that one, I'm kind of like, when the budget's approved and it's posted anyway. So I'm not too worried about that. But the plain language, I find that's more of an accessibility thing. And I would like to add some language to the budget or public record where it's adds maybe a term like that included in plain language explanation of key expenditures.
What does that mean? Language explanation.
Just, you know how when we talk, like even in this meeting in the commission, when we talk about this is what 701 deals with, and then Sam tells us what it's saying, he's doing for us what I would like to add for everyday residents. It's a summarization and kind of explaining on our everyday terms what it is that we're reading.
Sam, does the CIP look anything like the regular budget? Because that's what I was saying, if you go look at that CIP and their proposed budget, it's very plain language. That's what I was saying, until I saw something like that. And I would think the budget itself had to be a reflection of that document. Because like Amy was saying, like it tells you it's this project. This is what it's for. It's for drainage in this neighborhood, da, 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 da. Then it says the money came from this grant for this specific project and it can't be used for anything else. Remember like the Sunset Acres, about 10 million or, don't quote me on that, but whatever it was. But it could only be used for that drainage project. So it has all of the, like you just opened, I wish I had it.
So the budget does, I mean, it does, and I guess I'd have to actually open up the budget book to understand, because I'm trying to figure out legally how
It's a lot of
people can
spreadsheets.
argue what does plain language mean, I guess. I get the concept and I like the concept, but in terms of implementation, how does staff know if they're doing it in plain language or not? But the current budget does say it's like, one new employee for the planning department, one full-time employee for city clerk's office, one new bucket truck, one new, it does lay it out that way. So I'd have to,
Daniel, have you seen the budget for last year, the proposed budget that they prepared? Okay, so they prepared the budget, it's from the city manager, and you've got cover sheets on that, but they go through and they do a fairly good job, Sam's saying, of giving those details ahead of time. Now, I don't know whether that's what whether that is the final approved budget.
now I
don't
could see issues
There's a
like,
lot of
one of the common
spreadsheets.
terms
Budget because
here at the city,
numbers.
you talk about FTEs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
means full-time employee.
Exactly.
Are there areas where like maybe we use acronyms that we could spell out, I'm just not quite sure how to translate the concept into verbiage for this that's enforceable. I can the concept now.
I might suggest, and you were talking about in section 805,
In 805.
805. I might suggest that you take a look at last year and bring us back something that you think could be improved with that kind of language. And then let's see if at that time we can find a way to make sense of a amendment. Okay, does that work?
I agree, yeah, I know where you're coming from the constituents, I see where Sam's rolling, trying to figure this out too, about the wording. And I know that there are some things like the FTE, you're right, but there's usually something laid out there in the budget when I read through that. How thick that thing is, I know that there's some of the details there.
But there's no doubt, it's a confusing document. It's confusing when you're being asked to decide it.
So maybe it's something like.
But there's also a lot of spreadsheets, there's a lot of projections, there's estimates and projections, and there's actuals. And I'll tell you what, if you get good at mastering it, it's even different than the way the private sector would do it. They don't do at no. But I just mean, you would understand large organization budgets. If you do understand large organization budgets, it's it's different from from the private sector because,
This is massive.
yeah. I mean, $100 million.
But the thing I'm
Yeah.
contemplating.
There is reporting requirements and
Right.
there's auditing requirements.
But maybe like a legend, for example, if there are certain abbreviations throughout, maybe there's a legend at the beginning or there's an end that says this is what these things mean.
Okay,
I seem to think there is, that's why. I don't.
you work on that and we'll pick that one back up.
No, it's the public's
Anything to
asking
help people
for it.
understand it better.
Okay, let's talk, jump to section 901, please.
And
And, Sam, if you can give us just a short,
yes, this is where we're at. So most of our capital, this is a big part of the budget process, by the way. And as P and Z weighs in on this, where our priorities, we only got so much money for streets. But the city, for most CIP projects, they're massively expensive. We don't have general revenues to just pay. So what do cities do? They borrow over time so that each fiscal year, they, just like your mortgage, we can make payments in manageable installments. And this is authorizing the city, basically has the power to borrow that money. We have to, well, I guess that's the crux of it, our ability to borrow money. One of the things here, the bond record, showing all bonds that, 902 just says that we need a complete record of, showing all bonds and certificates of obligation, the date and amount thereof, the rate of interest, maturity schedule. So again, that's just something that we keep track of. Our in debt, when is our debt gonna expire? So some of our debt is for one project. We have road projects where we've been paying for 20 years and it's like, hallelujah, this is the last payment we're making on this project, like FM 110 or Wonder World Drive, for example.
There was one year when the rates dropped and they went through and they were able to refinance at that lower rate. It is,
we have a bond advisor city contracts with, and these are people that advise the city on management of their debt. Like Rob said, sometimes there's refinance opportunities. When you are going to borrow, they try to guide you to the best rate. And then they go sell your bonds in New York City on Wall Street.
And
And then they get you an exact,
and they do look at our rating. It's just like, like you have your credit rating, no different for cities. The better your credit rating, the cheaper the debt. And the thing is, for a city, that little interest rate difference is millions of dollars for a city. It's a huge difference. So all those things are critical. One of these things that on 903 is if we issue debt for a particular project, it says here, you may not divert those funds for something else. That there are bond covenants, and that jeopardizes the use of those bond funds, and it could create a problem for the city. So
I read that one and wondered what triggered that. That amendment.
Yeah.
Something happened in 2002, and I just wonder what it was. that
yeah,
caused
because
it.
it's all in the bond covenants anyways. You're not supposed to do that, but I guess something happened. Yes, sir.
Okay, we're coming up on our break, but we're making good progress. So let's go to section 1001, please.
All right. This is primarily giving the city the power to assess taxes. And where do we get revenues in the city? It's going to be taxes, property taxes and sales taxes. The primary things. Then you get franchise fees and you get fees for services such as utilities. So I think it's kind of generic stuff all the way around. We have the power to tax. That's,
I mean, taxes when due and payable, section 1005, that's state law, right? They're required to be, that's not a local law.
right, the tax code basically sets all that up.
Yeah.
Honestly, and it also allows for tax collections, and there's very little leeway. But this is all under state law. State law sets up, or if you don't pay your taxes, you're gonna pay
Major penalties.
possibly have a lien, you're gonna pay penalties and late fees, and it's all set by state law.
I did notice in this section, there are several references to his property, his
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So
and-
those in that list that you brought up.
Beyond that universal.
Yeah.
There's a
But-
bullet for your interim report.
Yeah, right.
But-
We're gonna be massively cheap.
Yeah, right. I don't know, I might.
So the city is allowed to assess, place tax liens, but all of that again is kind of automatic. The city actually does not go and do these things. How this works is the tax assessor, collector, and the Hayes County appraisal, well, we're in 3 counties. The appraisal district, they set the values. The tax collector assessor, they do all this on behalf of the city. And it's just automatic for them. It's their deadlines, they set up the tax bills, they're not paid by a certain date. It just all follows state law. And they're doing it for all the municipalities. And then they remit the funds to the city.
I mean, I just to go a little further on what Sam said, that with about in response to borrowing and taxing, it really is, it's a tremendous incentive to manage the finances of the city correctly, because when you get that great bond rating, you get those great rates, you get more projects done, you get more infrastructure built, you get needs satisfied. There's a built-in incentive to play by the rules, and the most stable form of revenue for a city is not property tax, or not sales tax, it's property tax. And most people don't realize that every dime of property tax that is paid in this city barely covers, like, I think it covers the police and fire department and maybe a little bit more. That's about it. It's just not the biggest source of revenue.
In San Marcos, I think you're correct. What I've heard, and I don't know if I'm
May have
mistaken,
changed.
I've heard that we are heavily dependent on sales taxes in San Marcos versus some other cities have
Yeah.
their portion of property taxes. And the problem with being reliant on sales taxes is they're very volatile. If we're relying just on the outlet mall and then everybody starts going to internet sales, that has a big impact. So, it's a true point.
Yeah, so anyway, I mean, it's not really related to our charge, but I just thought it.
But yeah, so tax liens, all of this is pretty much state law. And if you look at you can see that these sections haven't been amended. And I think it's primarily the state law is dictating that whole process. One of the,
And we haven't been asked by council to look at this or staff to.
No.
There are no issues.
There was nothing suggested. If it's all right with y'all, since we're gonna start back up on section 11, would you mind if we took our 5-minute break and come back at 7 o'clock and finish then? Great, thanks.
why I don't do car trips very well. I can sit. there.
I hear you. And
Slide to.
There's
You didn't
our-
know this number.
there's our cue. Okay, thank you. So we're back online, and after our very short break, thank you for making it back. And we are at section 11. So we are making progress. How about a short primer, Sam, on 1101?
The main thing about section 11, it's franchises. So rather than going through each one, let me just give the overview is cities have the power to charge people for using our streets. And where does the logical place to put power lines and pipelines and telecommunications lines? Streets. And why shouldn't the city be compensated? We pay for the streets, taxpayers pay for the streets. All this all of this section, Article 11 is saying, we have the power to grant franchises for any use of our streets, or public property. And those fees have to be tied to, they can't be arbitrary. They have to be based on what would be a realistic rent, if you will, for the use of the street. And there are actually companies and firms that actually help you determine what a reasonable franchise fee would be. And that's true with all of our city fees, by the way. We can't just charge to make a profit. Our fees have to be for cost recovery. So what happened recently is the legislature, I say recently, it's been quite some time now. We used to get fees from all the telecommunications companies, but what the state did is grant what they call statewide franchise to basically have a uniform rate for all cities. We don't have much say in it. The state is telling us this is what AT&T is going to pay you to be in your streets, and you cannot deny them access to the streets. There are conditions for it. They can't just, they're still allowed to follow, and we're, excuse me, you're allowed to have reasonable regulations, like they have to get certain permits, cutting permits. We get to review their plans. Got to make sure they're not interfering with our pipelines or other pipelines in the street. But basically what this is going to apply to predominantly is gas utilities and also electric, like Blue Bonnet and PEC franchises in the city.
Is this why gas is everywhere in the city? Like it's not out where I live, because they don't want to pay the fee to San Marcos?
No, what and you may know more because you've been on council. My understanding is that it's very difficult to supply gas based on our geology in this area. That's what I've always heard. But we do have some gas franchises. CenterPoint is in the city and another company called Sea Energy. So there are parts of town that are served by gas, but I think it's just a geology thing.
I also think it's a business thing for CenterPoint. It's probably expensive as heck to get new lines. They didn't build them when that was built, it was out of the city. So,
I know.
And one of the things about franchise.
I didn't know that though. I did not know there was no gas.
No, there's no gas. You
I
have
could
propane.
get one of those big bubbles.
Yeah.
You got those guys, it's called propane.
Usually they, and sometimes on this stuff,
Expensive. Too.
Okay, Sam, in 1101 line talks about vehicles for hire. I'm just kind of curious, how that, if Uber and all of our, if any of that is under that anymore, or was that?
Yes, we do have regulations so we've adopted ordinances governing use of our streets, like so we regulate Uber, taxi cabs, party buses. In some instances, you could have to grant a permit of some sort. And again, it's because of the use of our streets.
Okay, so party buses, that was kind of one of the general, thoughts on that, and just.
And what's funny about party buses, like every couple of years, some party bus company comes along and then they fold. Every 2 years, somebody wants to do a party bus, and I don't know.
It doesn't work, because people see it, I will tell you exactly why. They see it and they think running a party bus company is just fun, and you just go buy a bus and you just start having a party. But no, a party bus is equivalent to Greyhound or any other major carrier. And you have to carry that $5 million of liability. And when you have to start paying $20,000 a month for insurance, most people, it's over.
Yeah.
Because it's, even for one bus, you can pay as much as On the average, it's about $3,000 or $4,000 a bus. So God forbid you have a couple, you're having, it's a lot that people don't know. That's why they don't maintain.
The city does get, they've got their franchise fees, they've got the things for that.
Yes, sir, and it's in the budget.
Rest of them, there, we do get money coming into the budget.
Yes, and if you looked at just our last budget presentation, he talks about money in, money out, and he breaks it down, property taxes, sales taxes, franchise fees, permit fees, resource recovery fee, and they break it all down by every source of income we get is broken down, and franchises is specifically enumerated in the budget.
Do you recall what the percentage was for ad valorem property tax?
I
I was just curious. I,
If you have any
Always
specific
one.
questions, I'd be happy to go over it, but really, the bottom line is, it's just acknowledging that as a home rule municipality, our right to assess franchise fees. We can discriminate, so gas company comes in, we can't charge one gas company a higher rate than another one. Equal protection, things like that, just like we charge all our citizens the same amount of money for the activity center, whatever. So,
okay. I think 11, unless anybody's got any specific suggestions, is pretty tied down pretty tight with state stuff. There is a juicy one coming up, so let's go to section 12.
all right.
And I'm gonna ask my same question
Yes, sir.
again, we had no direction from council on this section nor anything
Yes,
from
sir.
staff that you had over this. Okay, thank you.
Swallow tongue. So Article 12, general provisions. This one seems to cover a lot of different things.
Yep.
1201, public access to records. All information collected by the city pursuant to law or ordinance in connection with transaction of official city business is public information and available to the public during normal business hours. The city, under the terms and conditions as provided in the Public Information Act. The big thing there is, yes, most information is public, but to give you an example, under the Public Information Act, we just got a request this week, and we get these occasionally. They will ask for the entire electric network, or all the water lines in the city, or all the wastewater lines in the city. And under Homeland Security rules and whatnot, that's been used for terrorist acts and sabotage. And so that's an example. No, we are not going to give you the entire map of all the water lines in the city. What we will give you is, if you're developing your lot here and you need to know, is there a water line in front of my street? We'll give you the street. Now, could somebody, it's kind of like the internet, how it aggregates out in that's what the internet did. Could somebody file 500 open records requests over time and start to piece together? It probably could, but the point is, we're not going to give it to them and make it easy, right? Similarly, attorney-client privilege information, that's confidential. You have to protect the interests of the city, right? Things like that. Certain personnel information, certain medical information of employees, or somebody who's arrested that might have medical information in the arrest report. If there was some sort of situation, we redact that. That's all that's saying. Any questions? Not part of the Public Information Act.
1202 is ethics.
Code of ethics.
Let me ask you, sir, let me ask you a question on 1201. And because this is, so if it is an ongoing investigation, that's usually where a lot of times that information is stopped. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I know there's a lot of times that's used if I'm asking for information. I'm just looking at this under those lenses, under that lens of, if people Okay, so yes, public information about, but if I'm trying to get body cams, or if I'm trying to get some information on, a police shooting, something along that line. I know right now, and usually that is also from a legal standpoint. I know that, right now, if I were to ask about Malachi Williams and from any of our bros, anyone on staff, they can't say anything about it, or because it's still ongoing potential. You don't have to answer that, but I'm just saying, I guess that's where I'm looking at this public access to records. Yeah, we've got that, but there's some caveats I know from people I'm just using that as one example.
Yeah.
I know a few others that you're right from the bigger standpoint as far as national security, okay, from the standpoint of cost, in doing that. But then I also know if you're looking at, for police records, as an example.
Yeah, and different records have different restrictions. So like just for body cams, state law has a unique set of rules just for body cam footage that is outside of the public information act. And those rules are really funky, and they're under the Texas Occupations Code of all places. But there's a set of things you have to do to get that body cam footage. And it's all, that one's by state law. Then, that's an example. I always feel that almost all information eventually gets out. But for example, if the city's in litigation on a matter, you can withhold information through the Public Information Act, but guess what? The information is going to come out through the lawsuit. The discovery, when you have witnesses on the stand and all. So usually information gets out one way or the other in the end, but there, if the DA is prosecuting a case, he's going to say, hey man, I'm trying to prepare my case. I don't want the police records released because we got a criminal trial coming up on it and we'll let the trial bring that out. So the DA will say, make requests that this information should be withheld for law enforcement. So yeah, there's a lot of
It's
nuances.
usually I see more on the law enforcement side. I've got one with Travis County from last year that they still continue to keep saying it's under investigation. And we're just trying to get some basic information.
No, I understand. I believe me.
So I guess,
We got
John,
a lot
I'm
of
sorry,
questions.
I just wanted to, because I did have some questions from some constituents, on that.
Well, my questions were regarding more, because I know you talked about public records, but more on the lobbying things. There's no state law that, mandates the recording of any lobbying done within local jurisdictions, but there are cities that do. Anytime that you would lobby for a specific movement, like in Houston, you have to register yourself as someone who is lobbying for it. So under transparency, is that something that we would ask for in the charter? Because I don't see a reason why any city councilman would not want to disclose that they've been approached, right? In lobbying in favor of an ordinance, right? Unless they're wanting to hide something. So I can see a reason why they would.
Let me gently push back on that because we had a very lengthy lobbying conversation about, say exactly what you just said, registration, all that stuff. And one of the snags that we got was, am I a lobbyist if I talk to my council member? Because if you're making that council member document every conversation that they have with an actual lobbyist, that's where it broke down was, and I can't remember all the specifics, but I do have notes on it. And it got to the point where it was like, everyone was a lobbyist. Every citizen who paid taxes, who called their council members, fit the definition of a lobbyist. And we felt, and I felt, and I'm not saying it's wrong, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be discussed further, but I'm giving you my recollection of it, was, if I call and have a conversation with a council member, obviously it's their right to say, hey, I spoke with, former mayor and he's blah, blah, blah. But there's times I just want to give you my opinion. I don't want it broadcast to the world. I'm not an elected official anymore. I'm just a citizen with an opinion. And I'd like to give it to you. If you can keep it in confidence, I'd appreciate that. That doesn't make me a lobbyist. It just makes me a citizen. And there's a lot of people like that in this town, because if you have to register every conversation and document every conversation, not only was there a lot of concern on our end, council wise, from the documentation process, the time required for that, but it was like, we didn't want to chill public input to us. And you might be talking about an industry that you do business with. And so there was a lot of concern in that sense. It wasn't so much concern, and then there was concern about I'm sorry if I sound like but we did have we had a very lengthy conversation about this. There was some concerns about people from outside the city. Well, they should just register as lobbying. And we had some concerns about people that wanted to open a business here and come meet. And one thing I will say that when I first got elected many years ago, I was talking to a former mayor, and she was telling me, everybody wants to talk to the mayor. No matter the situation, people just want to talk to the mayor. They don't always go to the council members. They don't always go to staff, but they want to talk to the mayor. And so I remembered that and made a point of always being available to anybody who wanted to talk to the mayor. And it just seemed really, now my calendar was public record. So if I had a meeting that was scheduled, because council members don't have staff, the mayor had the city clerk to help organize the calendar. So there was a staff person assisted. So when someone called, they had to go through her. She logged in the meeting date and time. That went on my official calendar, and that was public record who I was speaking with. But for just council members that aren't staffed, mainly due to budgetary reasons, it was really onerous. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not trying to diss your conversation,
Yeah,
if it's out.
I get the point, right? Like, it's good that you had that conversation. I think one point that you brought up that was like, that's one of those points, was when someone outside of the city comes in, then that would be a slightly harsher definition of a lobbyist, right? Because they don't have that interest as a constituent, and therefore, and so I guess I would be more open to the idea of like any organizations and outside folks that are not considered constituents to have to register themselves, right? I think that's a fair ask compared to an everyday citizen, because I get that, like, everybody that wants to talk to you that lives in the city, they just want to talk to you to get your opinion or to tell you what they're feeling, right? I completely get that.
Sometimes they would say, we're thinking about putting a $500 million business here. Seriously. We're thinking about building a $500 million plant in your city. But we can't discuss it with you until you sign a non-disclosure agreement. So what do? You're not voting on anything. You're not giving direction. You're just talking and listening. But it requires you, for massive competitive reasons, which I understand, not to disclose that conversation with potential rivals that might want to do the same thing. Or somebody might say, look, we're thinking about building a hotel. Is that something that you personally think is a good idea?
Yeah, I would say.
But so is that a lobbyist too?
It's just like, what example are you, like, can you be more specific,
Think of
like,
an ordinance that somebody would lobby for.
Oh, there's plenty.
There's,
Let me give you an example. We had, recently this last year, we had, one of the votes, at council that we had, a realtor group from outside city was calling people and saying, hey, we'll connect you with your city council member. You know, just, which one do you want the number for? You know, this is the perfect guy to try to call on these things is me, of course. You know, okay, and more about who paid you, you know, subtly. But yes, they were lobbying for, it was basically, what was that? It had something to do with P and Z, it had something to do with.
the data center, maybe,
No, this was downtown, it was the,
those apartments we just
it had,
voted on.
no, this is the one that was over here by the river. And there was a change, no, but there was a change, the council
That
was.
stopped dead in the water, is that the one? I never-
Well, that was one of them, but it had to do with the change at the time with council was looking at, that they.
The green space, the park plan, that.
Yeah, there was something along that line, that there was a vote that was coming, but basically what I'm getting at is that, yes, there are people that are from outside of town that are lobbying, from a realtor standpoint. They brought in big guns. They brought in the money that they had from outside of town to go ahead and pay for these, to blanket. They were going down and looking at voters.
So most of us get calls, because I got calls about the data center.
Yeah,
And my thing was,
from,
people, I don't know where they're from, because you don't know who they are.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I even got a call from an attorney, and I said, okay, look, this is the deal. Come to our meeting on Tuesday. You have an opportunity to speak so that the whole dais can hear you, because I'm not gonna make up my mind, and there's nothing that you can tell me to persuade me, because we will have people, we never know what's gonna happen in the meeting. So we know what's in our packet, but I think that, and I'm hoping everybody does this, because we kind of talked about this before, and I even would call people like John or Amy or somebody and say, hey, this person called me, this is what I said, and I've even called Amanda, and she says that's on the money. It's like, come to the meeting, I'm not gonna talk to you, I really, you need to say it so that everyone can hear you, because there's nothing that you could tell me that would persuade my vote, because I don't even know what's gonna happen at the meeting. I don't know who's gonna show up with some evidence, there's nothing I could tell you. Except I'm aware of what you're talking about. I've read my packet. We're waiting to see what happens in the meeting. And then I'll make a decision. And I've heard a lot of people say that.
And
basically,
No, I was gonna say, so I was gonna ask you, so what do you want to do in that situation? Like, are you suggesting that person who called her has to register as a lobbyist?
so because you basically shut down the conversation, right? And you didn't get into the specifics of anything. You didn't come to an agreement, like I agree with you or I disagree with you. You basically told them nothing, right? You basically said, whatever it is you want to tell me, come to the meeting, right? And that is not a lobbying conversation, right? Because there's nothing that needs to be registered there. You received a call, you successfully pushed the call away and said, just come to the meeting and then make your points there. Where I'm getting at is, if there's an outside firm that meets and you, let's say you're a city council person, you agree to have that conversation and you actually talk about like the pros and cons, or why should the ordinance go through, or why they want you to vote a certain way on an ordinance. That's a lobbying conversation, right? That is a full conversation that was had, not in the public record. And there's no reason why that should be disclosed. See what I mean? Because a lot of these folks have a lot of money and they have a lot of sway and they have the time to start swaying.
But because they're wealthy and have money, what is that? First off, I think lobbying, that should be if it's going to be regulated, it needs to be in an ordinance, because there's lots of viewpoints on this, and I never took any information that helped me understand the issue better before a vote was important. Whether it was something I agreed with, or my friends agreed with, or this side agreed with, or this side disagreed with. If it helped me understand the actual ramifications of the decision, I'm not going to turn that conversation down. And I don't think it's lobbying. I think it's educational. They're not giving you money. It's not, first off, so you know, there's requirements. Any contribution of any sort is prohibited past, what is it, $50?
Right, and you have to also.
There's no gifts.
Campaign.
Campaign contributions are required throughout your tenure in office. Reporting requirements are pretty stiff. They're transparent, but I'm just saying that I think, I'm not necessarily saying that. I just think the charter is not the place. It's an ordinance, a lobbying ordinance. And I will tell you that it's a stiff climb because so many people feel like then they're going to have to be a lobbyist. What if you have a citizen who just happens to own a big company and they call their council member and
But here's another thing. Just use the data center as an example. Since our meeting, I have found out that people had information that they knew that a lot of the things that the citizens and other people were saying was misinformation. So I think it's important sometimes if like the mayor or maybe a council, somebody meets with some of these people. But even staff, and you get a very good understanding of what's going on because things change over time. So when they might bring us something like we had, a month or more ago, it was one presentation. By the time it gets to us the other night, things had changed. But even by the time we're in the meeting, things had changed and progressed from there. And so I think it's important when people want to bring business that's going to bring tax revenue, that somebody needs to listen to these people, find out what it is and say, you can bring it, but bring your
go through the
information.
process. Go get your
Go through the
permits.
process. Like, we're not going to turn you down because, just like I look at that data center, that's a lot of revenue.
Did you guys
A lot of
know?
tax revenue.
Did the P and Z know what the revenue outcome would be?
Well,
We
asked them.
told, we kept asking. they kept saying
2.5 and
no.
3 million for the
Three or
school.
3.5.
Because that's not right. That's not your charge, right? Technically. But council members need to know
See,
because in the end, they may say, well, it's not enough worth it, or it's really worth it.
I think it's by the time this gets to council, it's so much has changed. It was so much misinformation that I think when you have people that know what's really going on, they can tell the public and educate them in a different way than what P and Z could. You see what I'm saying? So council's a whole different situation. Now, I don't think a council member should be meeting with people and saying, well, if you do this, this, and the other, then we'll vote for you. That to me is a whole different kind of situation.
Do we have an ordinance that addresses that?
Cause that's like, almost wanna say it's bribery.
Let me step in
That's
for
just
just a
We
second
want to
here.
stop unethical behavior.
So-
I'm sure we can.
Yeah, but let me step in just a second, because the other side of this is from the independent activists, the citizen side of this. The same thing applies, that the same rules apply for anyone that wants to come and if you are appointed as a commissioner, anyone or a city council member, I have a right to come and talk to you. Okay,
To
and
petition.
I have the same right to sit there and say, you know what? I expect you to vote on this. If not, I'm not going to vote for you next time. All
Which
right.
is a conversation that happens regularly.
Just listen, because you like to
But
hear.
that's my right to do that. I don't want that pulled out because as John said earlier, what's the difference between a lobbyist and a citizen lobbyist? It's a hard line that I would sit there and say, I really don't want to get into that. I would just assume, okay, just as long as I've got the
If
same
I
rights
call-
as somebody else does.
But, okay, here's the flip side of that, because I called Amanda, and I think they called you to say, I've got these people calling me. She said, you can't get in the weeds with them. You can listen, that's it. And just tell them, thank you for your call. Once we're in the meeting, I'll take all these factors into consideration. You just should not, if you're ethical enough, you just should not get in the weeds with people and have a rapport. And I even, when one person called me and they had something to say, I said, I'm not the person you need to be talking to. You need to call this person because they can help you better.
So, yeah, and where she's coming from there, though, is a little bit different. That's from the open meetings aspect. If those people talk to a majority of the Planning and Zoning Commission or a majority of the council or any other board commission, it could put, they're not in any trouble. It's gonna put the members for what's called a walking quorum. Y'all may have heard that term, potentially, and not in every instance, but if 4 of you are starting to talk on the same subject and all that conversation occurred outside of the meeting, and then you just show up to the meeting and vote, the public doesn't know your rationale. But that's where Amanda's coming from, is just make sure you're safe under the Open Meetings Act. But from an ordinance standpoint, we don't have an ordinance specifically regulating that kind of conduct. What we regulate in our ordinance, I've had the ethics ordinance up, and it's really about campaign contributions, financial types of things. So we don't have a lobbying ordinance
Yes.
currently. I know it's been discussed.
Yes, I would say it was 2018, 2019, and it was a lengthy probably year-long conversation. Lot of input, lot of back and forth. I don't remember it all. I remember.
It ultimately did, I guess.
I would be interested in what Houston has, because you're mentioning Houston.
Yeah.
That's a whole different situation.
I just wanted to know what else you have to say, because I think you're advising something.
Well, it was more in response to what you were saying. So I get the gift, right, situation. Those are pretty, they've been around, we know about gift giving and taking bribes, essentially, right? But lobbying on its own is not inherently, right? I'm not saying that it's like, you can lobby for good causes, you can lobby for selfish reasons, right? It's when you're an organization that you have the ability to gather funds to put real time into something as opposed to an individual. If you come as an individual, you're protected under the umbrella basically of free speech, right? Like you're speaking as an individual, but if you're speaking as I come to you with the Association of Realtors, right? We firmly believe that this needs to happen. Or I come to you through this conservation organization that is got chapters in every city in Texas, right? This is a bad rule that you're doing right here. It's going to affect it. We've seen it in this other city. When you come holding the power of an organization or an entity, then you hold sway in the conversation that you're going to have with someone, right? Money doesn't need to be involved for you to sway a independent city council, right?
So is a neighborhood organization count?
An organization.
Okay,
If you're
so let's play this out. There's local Board of Realtors, San Marcos Board of Realtors. Every year they have a debate. I don't want to say they're powerful, but they're an organized group. They have a vision of things that are sometimes much different than other constituencies in the community. But there's neighborhood organizations. There's the San Marcos River Foundation
I know.
is an organized organization
And we
that
always.
lobbies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the San Marcos River Foundation, in most people's mind in the city of San Marcos, is an honorable organization, but they are strong lobbyists.
And we seek their advice all the
And
time.
many times most of the people that I think elected officials hear from in Smurf are locals. They have a big local membership.
But what you're saying is that you want this to be transparent.
That's it, right? I'm not saying you don't talk to these people. All I'm saying is if the San Marcos River Foundation
But is that
speaks
in the
to
charter?
every council, right?
Yeah.
It's just registered that they spoke. That's it. It's just registered that if out of nowhere the vote were to change and we have a rule in place that states Free the San Marcos River, which was the other organization that was countering the Free Foundation, right? If all of them are registered as speaking to, and suddenly the vote changes into a different, like removal of holding on to Cage Dam, right? Then we can see, right, that there was influencing involved. Once we go back and look at who
Hey,
thinks.
check this out. When that attorney called me, he said, I have talked to this person, that person, and you're the last person I can talk to, but I chose you because I'm coming at you from an historical preservation perspective. But I wouldn't dare talk to him for a lot of reasons. So I said, I'm not the person you need to talk to. Call Linda Coker. You can get your answers from her because that's what she does every day, all day. So most people know that it is against the law if you start talking to everybody. You know, that like you can't call every council.
Right.
And how do people?
Oh, we
know
had,
that?
we had a,
Like, I know-
planning
It's
commissioner
not
that,
making sense.
Yeah, it is.
No,
Because
for
it,
like, just for people like citizens, like,
Well,
most people
most
wouldn't
coun-
know that.
like with us, if you call us,
actually though, you can talk to, you can talk to every council member.
oh, I
There's
thought you couldn't.
Well, there's a legal interpretation that says if I'm a citizen and I talk to 4 council members, then I've created a walking quorum. But call the Texas Attorney General's office, speak to the open meetings division. They have a division there, and they will tell you, you're not prohibited to talk to, you can talk to anybody you want as an elected official. They can talk to all their councilmen. They have a right. No, I'm not getting into it. They have a right to petition. I mean, it's in the Constitution, right? To petition your grievances, however it's worded.
So tightly.
Okay, Sam, you missed out.
Well,
I'm sorry, all I had to say.
I don't want to belabor that point, but you know, Michael Cosentino had a pretty strong opinion on it. And we had other attorneys come in from across the states that, you know, there's very few cities who do this. And then I called the Attorney General's office, and they were very clear. And the lady was like, I wrote that part of the law. And that's not what it meant. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we were being told for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
You're talking about walking forms?
Well, yeah,
Listen to what he said.
no, I don't want to go into this point. Well, I don't want to put Sam on
We're
the,
talking about.
we're off topic.
I guess, yeah.
We're not talking about open
Can
meetings.
I ask kind of to draw it back on topic, I guess? Daniel, where specifically are you wanting to be changed here? And what, maybe we go back and we look at some language. I mean, I'm open to what you're saying. I'm just trying to figure out where that's going to fit specifically in here.
It would
What
be-
we're looking at change.
It would be under personal interest and code of ethics in
Okay.
2, right? We have pertaining to conflict of interest, we have 1, we have disclosure of members for their interest in business entities, that's 2. 3 is financial interests in sale or purchase of any city land, right? Similar. And then for a period of 2 years leaving office, a city member shall not have any financial interest in sale. Then I would add a 5 and add the bit about
Okay, so how did that chick that used to be planning director come back and do all these things?
She waited 2 years.
Could you, if you have wording, could you email it? And that way it would give everyone maybe time, y'all could
Yeah, that's, I
like
guess.
percolate for the next meeting or something to kind of.
No, because I just want to see what you're thinking and where you're going and then zero us in on that discussion a little bit and see. So it would be a section 5 and then it would be just in general about the lobby.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have the proposed wording?
to some extent, yes. With the conversations that we're having, I'm thinking of slightly tweaking that wording so that it kind of fits kind of what we all see. But I mean, I have city shall maintain a public archive of official emails, text messages, and any meeting minutes involving elected officials and city businesses relating to ordinance conversations. Any meeting, email, phone call between lobbyists and city officials regarding city business must be disclosed within 72 hours on a publicly available portal. Elected officials must publish quarterly reports summarizing their, so I have a list of, those are the three things, right? Name and affiliation of each participant, purpose and outcome of the meeting, and any policy changes.
But
right?
what
So these are all-
happens if they make you sign a non-disclosure?
That's pretty rare.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just,
Yeah.
you brought it up and I'm just.
I only brought that up
wanna make sure
because
that
it was
we
such a
think of
huge
everything.
project and,
And you did sign it, right? I mean.
Absolutely. yeah, I mean, it was, city manager.
If it's non-disclosure, just make.
How-
And if a company, how often does that happen lately? If a company comes and they want to talk to you about,
Well, that was,
Every couple of years we get, it does happen.
So it does
Not
happen.
constantly, but,
very rare. I didn't mean to sound like that was the norm. It wasn't. It was just,
but he says every couple of years or
every
something.
once in a while we get those. I wouldn't say, 5 times a
But how
year.
do you, but we sign them and listen to what they have to say and keep it moving or?
It depends on what it is. To the extent we can, under, public.
eventually they have to go public with their
Yeah.
permitting and all that stuff. It's just, you're getting into a point where you could really diminish the interest in doing business in San Marcos. And I would hope that you're prepared to define lobbyist.
Yes.
Yeah, like specifically.
Yeah, it would need a definition.
Okay, so.
That's was the hang up
Like-
last.
Like earlier, we're gonna bring back some wording for next
Yeah,
time. Give you
absolutely.
next Wording for next time. Yeah, that way we can kind of parse it down a little bit and see. Take a look at.
Anything in 1203 or 1204
If I
that
could just suggest real quick too, if we could get your proposal, and if not, we'll just do it like this, but if you have wording, we can send it ahead of the next meeting so everybody can have their own ideas to, let it, so. Code of ethics,
well 1203 or 1204 nepotism.
yeah,
So,
So-
so we're good on 1202 then?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about 1202.
Yeah, but then you get to the Ethics Review Commission, John. That was.
Okay. Go ahead.
That's a little different. I don't know that I've got anything there. I'm asking though, because that is major. That,
so we have a pretty detailed ethics ordinance that is implemented because of the charter here. And again, I guess it comes down to, do you want to hard code very specific details in a charter, or do you want to allow the ordinance to get into the minutia of the violations? The ordinance is pretty detailed, talking about what constitutes conflict of interest. A lot of it tracks state law, and to some degree, our ethics ordinance is stricter than state law. So,
I know our disclosure reports are far more in-depth than any other surrounding cities that I know of. Smaller cities, not Austin or St.
We can just do more with the ordinance.
well, I mean, it's your prerogative to suggest changes. I'm just saying it just depends, we do have a pretty detailed ethics ordinance that implements this, but again, it's your prerogative to.
Is there anything on, let me just ask the group, is there anything else on 1202 that needs to be fleshed out?
Have there been any problems with the Ethics Review Commission? I mean, it seems to me when I've heard about it, they have what they need to do their job. I've not known of any holes in.
Never heard of
Um,
anything bad.
I'm just looking at the ordinance here, and I have the ordinance and a standard 8.5 by 11 layout. It's 14 pages, our ethics ordinance on that layout. So for whatever that's worth, it's fairly detailed. It does cover financial disclosure statements, conflicts of interest, employee,
So there's an ordinance and a charter provision
that's
on all
correct.
these
Yes,
items.
sir.
They were very.
And so, for example, duties of the Ethics Review Commission, they are all carried out in the ordinance. One of the things they do is render advisory opinions. We conduct hearings. We meet at least once a year to review the code of ethics. And look at campaign finance reports and all that. And it gets into more detail than the charter. Because again, the charter is the Constitution, the ordinance is implemented with more detail too.
That answers some of the questions. Thank you.
But certainly prerogative.
Well, that. Okay, so.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, no problem at all, Rob. I'm glad you did. Is 12, question on 1205, 6, 7, and 8, are those state law type things?
Did you start with 4 or just?
No, I'm on page 34 of 36.
No, I mean, put sections.
4.0. 05, 06,
Yeah.
07, 08, they look, is that typical
Yeah.
home rule city stuff?
That's pretty typical, I mean, we don't, for any suit or proceeding, we're not required to execute bonds for that. Whereas,
Provision covering damage suits.
yeah, one of the things about that is people are supposed to notify the city 90 days if they have a potential damage suit against city. And sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. Depending, for example, if it's a federal lawsuit, that may override the requirement to provide 90 days notice, but in other types of, say it's a auto accident, kind of routine fender bender.
Okay,
We do have these requirements that you're supposed to notify us.
thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I do have a suggestion.
Yes, sir.
12 seems to me to be a dumping spot for charter provisions.
We were talking about that.
And I'm kind of wondering if like section 1211 amending the charter and 1212 charter review commission. Well, I guess you have to put them somewhere. That's not enough to be, I've just been looking for items that look similar, like could 12 be, because it's so all over the place. It's ethics, it's charter review commission, it's fluoride.
Ethics can almost be its own article. If to go in, I actually we didn't have this discussion about where to put one of your changes and we had mentioned 12 seems to be this miscellaneous, but could we?
So ethics,
Subparts to it.
ethics is really section, I mean, could constitute 1201, 1202, 1203, 1204. Right? And then,
Almost 1204 through 6 could almost be their own article.
I'm just wondering if it's worth it to propose, changing some of these miscellaneous items to a different section. They have been growing.
They're just articles, of similar articles usually contain similar things. We could propose some article captions if it makes it more accessible for somebody looking at an index.
Easier for somebody.
Like you could put a section 13, that 1301, where it seems to me that section 1205 would start. Because that's separate, seems to be separate from,
And actually even 1204, that's like that execution,
1204 is?
garnishment, funds belong to the city.
Okay, let's just take and run it through an AI and have it,
What you say, what is the suggestion?
Well, it's because it seems to be all over the place. Is thinking maybe section 12 would be the ethics and nepotism and stuff like
I
that.
believe that's it, all of the sections.
Those sections, and create a new section 13, which is
Yes.
these
like, sorry, like 1204.
Couldn't we call section 13 general provisions and section what is
Yeah.
now currently general provision be code of ethics or
Yeah, I think you could.
Code of ethics.
Something
It's
like that.
own-
I agree.
Yeah.
Just
I'm in
ethics.
agreement with that, ethics. I think that
So
needs its
then-
own little.
Section 13 could be general provisions and that it's kind of a landing spot for some of these new, like the fluoride one. That was a referendum. Has to go somewhere, but
So
doesn't,
what are you saying? So 12 can become just simply code of ethics?
Or ethics, ethics and nepotism and ethics or something like that.
Okay, and then what is the new section?
1205 and on, right?
Or total?
1204.
Or interest.
Could be general provisions. Which is what Title 12 currently is.
Look it
Yeah,
up and-
general provisions could be start at 1204, would now be 1301,
Yeah, I think that.
1302, and it doesn't look so mashed up.
You know, I think, I kind of thought, although I don't know if it's worth moving, I thought holdover of officers was
Yeah.
oddly placed too.
What is that?
Uh,
I get it. That should be in council members.
well, it affects all city officials, like any officer of the city, all board members. If your term expires, but we don't fill the vacancy, technically you can continue to vote until the seat is filled. So again, it seems an odd place, but I don't know if there's another great
Would that be
place.
where,
That would probably be back here in
commissions and stuff like that? Wouldn't that go there?
Well, the thing is, it's universal to all officers of the city. That includes city council. So I think that's the reason they have a
Yeah.
universal, because they didn't want to have to say it multiple times under.
Yeah. I don't think it's terrible that it's there.
Yeah.
But especially if general provisions wasn't so long. And
Yeah.
we're making general provisions shorter.
I think it helps.
I think it helps that one.
I like the idea of accessibility and if you're going, trying to find something
Yeah.
here specifically about ethics, they're putting more ethics.
It's not
in place, for that.
In the beginning.
Okay, so before we go on what could be section 13 general provisions, is there any suggestions on that one? Anything that jumped out for anyone? Which is now section 1204 through 1215. Because if not, I think I'm hearing consensus to make that a freshly different section, which I think makes sense. And section 12 would be a little shorter than it is now. So here's what I'm kind of thinking. I just want to bounce it off you guys. We have the council interim report next week. We have gone through at least once all sections of this charter. We have a fair amount of consensus items that we will bring back for a formal roll call by person. But in order to put those together, it's going to take a little time to go through and make sure that everything gets back the way we discussed it in our meeting, in the meetings leading up to this one. Do you think it would be all right if we skipped a week? Take a week off and then we can get together and start to produce the first list of roles, and then go back to some of the items that we need further clarification on.
And it would also look like, it's almost gonna look like how it will appear on the ballot, really, in a sense.
More formal.
Yeah, we'll start to
Direction.
have wording. as to each section.
So next week would probably be good since you have other commitments plus city council and then trying to work with
Yeah, it's-
Sam on the.
What's that?
Are you saying we still meet next week, but the week after?
No, I think it would take a little time to this.
So Thursday, April 3rd, we skip, we go to Thursday, April 17th. I'd also add that we wanted that one.
Seven.
be able to.
And you're-
You're kind of ahead of the curve right now in terms of compared to what I've seen in some past.
Yeah.
So you're doing pretty good.
So I predict that there's the next meeting to go through again a few items that we haven't, hopefully everyone will be here, Garber's perspective as well. And begin that process of formalizing the list of recommendations to city council with the consensus items that we had to date. And then one more meeting after that, where Sam can take the time to make sure the legal T's are crossed and I's are dotted, that the language that would actually go on the ballot, we would review that and then just approve that. That was the last meeting we had because then they have to schedule the final report at city council. So there's a couple more meetings. past-
Okay, so we
past
skip
those.
next week,
Yes,
okay, and then it's.
The 10th.
yeah, the following Thursday.
No.
The one after
That's not
that,
any-
The next one would be, oh yeah, no, you're right, okay, the 10th is coming.
at 5:30 here. Does that work for everybody?
It's fine.
I think that gives us plenty of time to go through our consensus items, to rediscuss these ones from tonight that are still kind of hanging out there.
Sam, just one, again, I'm gonna follow up with the, was there anything from city staff on any of those last sections that they want us to look at? Okay.
Sir, other than the list you got at the very first meeting from council, those were the items.
Yeah.
The one staff issue was that one we discussed about, and I think you all agreed to maybe give the clerk 60 days to count.
Right, it was the
Or-
clerk was the one, and that's what
That
I
was
was
the only
asking.
one. That's the
Okay.
only one that's I'm aware of.
Okay.
I had one more thing, and I had spoken to John about it. After that day that we met on the planning and zoning requirement for time, remember you had thought of two because of accessibility and trying to get folks come in. We had talked about him being in the city for a short amount of time. And we talked about the importance of having 5 years experience, right? And at the time, I was trying to figure out language to make to where we could have both things happen at the same time and not reduce too much, but not change the makeup of the board and the voting power of the board, right? Because you want to have the experienced individuals who have been here a long time to be able to have more sway, right? So I came up with this change in the wording. I know we agreed on 3 years at the time. We changed it from 5 to 3. But I came up to 701, if you guys want to look back at 701B. We had all agreed on 3, but at the time I came up with Planning and Zoning Commission. To be eligible for appointment to the commission, at least 6 members must have resided in the city for a period of at least 5 years. And at most 3 members may have resided in the city for at least 2 years before the date of appointment. And the reason I did that is because the voting power is 5 members out of the 9, right? Correct. So 6 members for sure always have to have 5 years of living in the city, right? So these are people who have been here and had the opportunity to know what's what here. Allowing at most 3 means that if you can't find anyone who wants to be a part of the planning and zoning, right, that has been here 2 years, you can still have lived in the city for a longer period than 2 years and still fulfill the requirements that are set forth by this language, right? So in essence, you could have 8 members that are 5 years and 1 member that is 2 years. Or you could have 7 members that are 5 and 2, or at most you can have 3 members that are 2 years and the rest are at 5 years. And as the years keep adding on, you just become one of the members that are 5 years, but you always allow space for someone like John, for someone like, let's say I've only if I were to move to Austin, right, and I've served in this charter, I'm gonna find interest in zoning and planning, right? So then I would be one of those people that comes from not living here very long, but is pretty well versed on the matter to be able to add something to it, right? And especially after 2 years, you kind of feel for your community if you're interested. So that's why I wanted to propose that to you guys. I know we said 3 when we all agreed, but I felt like this way really allowed for accessibility, but still gave the majority of the voting power and the direction of the board to the 5-year plus members.
And I think we saw that 5-year come into play on Tuesday night. Because people that had lived here, you knew the area. You were more familiar with what was happening. Opposed to someone that would be new and just see them talking all these dollar signs and stuff. So I'm not opposed to that.
And I could try to pass this. I had sent it to Sam, but I didn't print it out.
Well, can
but I
we,
can show you.
I mean, can we go ahead and put that, so you've got the wording, we're gonna come back in 2 weeks.
Can you?
In the next meeting.
Yeah, I can read it one more time.
No, please, let's talk about it now, just kind of give you
Yeah,
the
I
idea.
just wanted to give you now so you can think about it.
No, I appreciate that.
It's to be eligible for appointment to the commission, at least 6 commission members must have resided in the city for a period of at least 5 years, and at most 3 members may have resided in the city for at least 2 years before the date of appointment. Everything else is the same as it was, right, to be eligible service. But that allows for flexibility in the makeup of your, right?
So you're saying at most 3 members, so is it possible under your wording that only 1 member has 3 years and everybody else have 5 years? In case you can't find newer people, that's what your theory.
So when
Okay.
you register to be considered, you would have to say, I don't remember if we have to say no or not. How long you been? Yes, you do.
Yeah, it stipulates that don't even apply if you haven't lived here for 5 years. I mean, it says the requirement. Let me rephrase that.
Well, I do think that's a creative thing, and I really kind of like it.
Listen, I'm not
I
opposed to
also
it.
think that it allows, like, the young people, the new people, I should say, not necessarily young, but the new people to find their footing, to sort of learn from the people that have maybe been here longer. So I think makes the mix good. It's a variety, it's
And
diversity.
I think as long as you, like when they're appointing, like you're saying, then you just don't have all these new people that've been there for 2 years and just clueless.
Right.
See, that would be a big issue.
And under the way it's written, when it says at most 3 members, you could be at 0 members that are 2, right? You know what I mean? Like things could perceive, but this
And city
allows
council
for.
picks them anyway.
Exactly, so this allows for. I believe, right? It allows for the possibility of someone to have a chance, right? To have a chance to get in there, and they don't have to overwhelm everything and be like, you know what you're talking about. That's okay, that's 1 voice out of 9. So we're still good, right? But and I figured this is a good way if we, for whatever reason, when we revisit things, this is a good way for us to still protect, right? But allow for accessibility.
Okay, so let me ask you something else. What other boards have that steep of a requirement? Is there any other?
I'd have to look at all of them. To be honest
Because I
with you.
think that if you go messing with one, then what about the others? So I'd be
Of course.
interested for you to tell us what all boards have all these stipulate,
Now, the charter, of course, felt that the P and Z was the only one worthy of putting in the charter versus other boards.
I don't think there's any, I know that there are a number of boards that have specific requirements for the membership. Like, has to be a expert in there had to be architects, there had to be someone in the background of historic preservation.
attorney and stuff like that.
And those types of boards were always very difficult to fill membership. Because you had to find someone that fit. Well, what's that board that reviews the
CBO,
ZBOA had to be There's like 5 different specific
Yeah,
requirements.
there's every board, and almost every board requires residents. But not with a set minimum or just that you're a resident of the city. We don't need people from Austin, you know.
Right.
Not even the county, because it's not fair. They don't pay taxes and they shouldn't be able to come in and tell us what to do and we want to pay taxes. I would really oppose that because that's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, you get.
I think all the boards are that way.
Yeah, like,
I can look at, if you're just curious what other.
I was just curious,
But I'm
but if
aware
it's
about
not,
it.
if that's the only one in the charter, then there's no point looking at
If
it.
you look on the city clerk's site for the charter, you know, it's listed out all the requirements there. And I
But like you said, every board, a lot of boards are just completely different.
Okay, so we're bumping up against our hard stop time at 8. Did you? Yeah.
It's okay. We can
Oh.
do the hospital can test run because something didn't happen today. I don't know what. But he's in the hospital having a test run, but he's okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
good, thank you.
That's what we
We'll
will
be praying.
That's
Thank
what we.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, we wish him
Yeah. Forward.
the best in his recovery. Um,
For the council meeting, because
yeah, I
Yeah.
understand. So we're going to end with do we have any press and public available? Okay, so I'll go ahead and declare us adjourned at 8:11.